the Ukrainian General Staff and the Office of the President have done a very good job protecting information. We should not know when and where and how, because if we know, then obviously the Russians will know. So this is important that the General Staff has been so disciplined in all of this. Nonetheless, there is obviously a lot of anticipation, and it's clear that the General Staff and Ukrainian Armed Forces have been working very hard to prepare for the next phase of the war. Now, before they would actually launch an attack, if you will, of course, they're going to spend a lot of time doing what we would call shaping operations to prepare the ground, to prepare the situation so that when the attack commences, it has the best chance for success. So that means destroying or disrupting Russian transportation networks, air defense, ammunition, headquarters. This is all an important part. And it may not have a set time limit. It may be planned as a condition. When certain things have happened, then they're ready. So I think that's how I would imagine that they're doing this. But also they have to prepare their own forces. Are they at the level of training? Have they practiced enough of what we call combined arms with artillery, infantry, tanks, engineers, etc.? Do they have enough for the ammunition and all of these things? And then finally, the ground. I mean, obviously you want to be able to move as quickly as possible once this has started. So all of these factors are the things that the General Staff is considering. There's another factor here that is not talked about nearly as much, and it's the Russian side. I believe that the Russians are very fragile right now. We know that Prigozhin and Shoigu, Kadyrov, all of these guys hate each other. We know that there are zero Russian soldiers that want to be in Ukraine. We know that they also are running out of ammunition. Yes, they're launching missiles against apartment buildings, and one day this is going to be stopped. But the inability of the Russian Air Force to destroy even one convoy or train bringing equipment and ammunition from Poland into Ukraine, that is amazing to me. That shows how inept they are. They cannot hit a moving target. And so I believe the Russian side is fragile. And if and when the Ukrainian counteroffensive begins, if they get momentum, once they make penetration of these Russian lines, I believe it is possible. It is possible that the whole thing collapses. I don't know this, of course. I may be wrong. I may be surprised, but I think the potential is that this could go much faster. No doubt it will be very difficult. No doubt there will be casualties. No doubt the Russian side will attempt to preempt all of this. So I think that reports of a major Russian offensive have been exaggerated. We saw last September when Russia attempted a partial mobilization. 500,000 Russian military-age males left the country rather than be mobilized. And the Ministry of Defense was not prepared to handle the mobilization. We saw that the Russian soldiers did not receive proper equipment, training, accommodation. It was a disaster. And I don't think that the Ministry of Defense in Russia has fixed all of these problems. And so for sure, they are getting more troops in, but I don't see any evidence that they are better trained, better prepared. And so what they do have, the Russian military leadership continues to push these untrained or poorly trained soldiers into the meat grinder around Bakhmut and places like this. So it's hard to tell if there really is a new offensive or not, or if they're going to delay it because they're not ready. But I am skeptical that we're going to see anything more significant than just an increase in the number of mass infantry attacks. For me, the biggest surprise was, number one, how poorly the Russian forces performed, how weak Russian logistics are, how strong Ukrainian civilian resistance has been. I knew the Ukrainian soldiers would do well, but I didn't anticipate how strong Ukrainian people would be. The overall amount of ammunition being expended has beyond anything I ever imagined. Certainly in 20 years of Iraq and Afghanistan, we never came close to this much ammunition being used. So that has been something. But I've also been reminded of the importance of young leaders, leaders at the company, platoon level, battalion level, that are skilled and able to make decisions at the lower level. This is something that Ukraine has done very well. And also reminded of the importance of having sergeants at the tactical level. Again, this is something that the Russians do not have, but which Ukraine has developed very quickly. Ukrainian soldiers are so fast, so quick at learning to use new technologies. And they impressed me back in 2015 and 16 when I first started seeing them in Yavoriv at the training area. And that's why I'm so confident that they can learn to use any new system that they receive from the West much quicker than people would expect. War, the conditions of uncertainty dominate. There's so much uncertainty out there, so much fog and friction that it's impossible to know exactly what's going to happen everywhere. And so we have learned over the last couple of centuries that to have a decentralized command and control where decision-making can be pushed down to the lower level so that leaders can make decisions on their own as long as it accomplishes the higher objective. Whereas the Russian system, everything is centralized. Decisions are made at the top and then pushed down. And that's why you see such huge casualties by Russian forces, because they just push forward as they were told, regardless of the conditions on the ground. And so that means that requires a system of trust where junior leaders are trusted to make decisions that would enable them to exploit opportunity because they will see on the ground what's actually happening better than somebody back in the headquarters. Annexed it back in 2014 because they wanted the strategic advantage of having Crimea to dominate the Black Sea, to dominate Ukraine's economy. I mean, with Russian forces in Crimea, they block any access into Azov Sea. So even if Berdansk and Mariupol were liberated and Russia still sat in Crimea, Berdansk and Mariupol would never be able to operate again. And of course, as long as Russia sits in Crimea, the port of Odessa is never going to be safe. There's over 100 ships in Odessa now that are loaded with grain that cannot go anywhere until they have been inspected by a Russian inspector. Why is that? Because they control Crimea and the Black Sea Fleet sits right there. So I think that once Crimea is lost to Russia, that will create such a massive blow inside Russia, inside the Kremlin. There's already, I think, very, very intensive debate inside the Kremlin. We see Prigozhin. He constantly criticizes Shoigu and Gerasimov. Yesterday, I saw reports, I don't know if it's true, but I saw reports that Prigozhin's name could no longer be said in official Russian media statements. This is because they are getting tired of his disruptive saying that it's only his forces that are doing anything, not regular Russian forces. I think General Surovikin, and Kadyrov, you don't see too many stories of Chechens being slaughtered the way you do everybody else. So it looks to me that Kadyrov, who talks a lot, but all of his soldiers look pretty well fed, and you don't hear reports of a lot of Chechens being killed. So I think he's kind of keeping them out of the fight. So you've got these different warlords that are thinking about